Do you have a hard stop or anything coming up by any chance?
I have no hard stop. We could talk for hours if you need to.
Hours. All right. Cool. Awesome. Well, let's do it. What's up, UX fam? How's your mom and them? Welcome to another episode of Beyond UX Design. I'm Jeremy. If you're new here, welcome to the show. I am super stoked to have you. And if you haven't done it already, please consider subscribing to the show wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you are a regular here and you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That'll help me out so much more than you can imagine. And this week's audiobook recommendation fits perfectly with today's episode, The Courageous Follower, Standing Up to and for Our Leaders by Ira Khalif. The Courageous Follower explores the vital role of followers in any leadership dynamic, emphasizing the importance of active engagement, critical thinking, and ethical responsibility for followers. And the book offers some practical advice on how to support and challenge leaders effectively. The book encourages followers to become more courageous, independent thinkers, and advocates for a healthy balance of power between the leaders and the followers for successful and ethical leadership. So make sure you check that out. It's a really great book. Head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to start your free trial. Download The Courageous Follower completely free and help support the show in the process. And as always, thanks so much to Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin for all their support. And if you want to join these fine folks and help keep the show independent and ad-free, you can become a patron for as little as $3 a month. That's less than $1 an episode. And if you do that, you'll get some sweet, sweet perks for your support. And of course, if you think the show is worth sharing, then I would love it if you told some friends. So a couple months ago, I had an episode managing up, and Marnina, one of my good buddies that I met on LinkedIn, tagged Dr. David Leitner and said, you should listen to this. And Dr. D came back and he said, this actually reminds me a lot about followership. And I said, I have never heard of that term before. So I reached out to Dr. D and asked him to come on the show to talk about followership today. I am so excited. Dr. David Leitner is an educator specializing in followership, leadership, and strategy. He spent the last 10 years helping people become effective followers to better support leadership and improve execution. Dr. D is also a disabled IDF veteran with a severe chronic pain disorder, and he shares his experience to teach leadership, followership, teamwork, grit, and determination. And through one-on-one lectures and group workshops, he covers topics like choosing followership, sacrifice, leadership, understanding politics, and strategic thinking. And along the way, he's had the opportunity to significantly impact the lives of an amazingly diverse group of people and give them a basis for their future success. And that's what it's all about for him, helping people succeed. And Dr. D, welcome to Beyond UX Design. I am so excited to talk to you today. How's it going?
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. I'm doing good.
I am so happy to hear it. So Dr. D, a couple months back, you mentioned a word I had never heard before. Never heard of followership. I think we've all heard leadership time and time again. And if you listen to this podcast, you've heard me talk about the importance of leadership behaviors. And I think the whole time, what I was thinking was exactly this sort of concept of followership. I just didn't have the terms for it. So before we hop into this term followership, why don't you tell us a little bit about you, your background, how you found out about followership, and then let's dive into the topic itself. But tell us a little bit about you.
I've been a disabled veteran for over 20 years. I suffer from something called complex regional pain syndrome, and it's actually the reason I started my university career, because otherwise I would probably still be in the Army.
Wow.
I wanted to be an officer. I wanted to be a leader. I was one of those gung-ho, get things done kind of people. And then I got hurt and I started school, and I actually focused on Army strategy and national security.
Oh, wow.
At university in Bar Ilan in Israel. During that time, we spoke a lot about leadership. Leadership was one of those things: leadership, command and control, C2, C3, C4, intelligence, like all kinds of military terms. And I got really into it, and I thought it was very interesting. And then I ended up starting a direct PhD after I finished my BA. And I specialized in international relations and leadership. I actually was trying to figure out how I could determine if the West was really a team fighting WMD proliferation and terrorist organizations that were trying to get their hands on WMDs. I was pushing through all the papers and all the books about leadership. And at some point, I found this book by Robert Kelly called Followership. And I was like, what? That's not a term. That's not oh my God, it's a term. And there's a way to use it analytically. And he uses it for people, like in business. But I was like, you could apply this to states. can I apply this to states, please? And I wrote up my proposal, and I was like, I'm going to apply a concept called followership to 3 Western states, Britain, Israel, and Australia, to see if they are following the U.S. lead on WMD proliferation and anti-proliferation.
Oh,
And I did it over a 15-year period. And the West was never really united in the way it was doing things using followership. You had very different kinds of followers, and the way they were responding to it was really cool. And that's sort of how I got my first, like, put my toe in the water, as it were, to followership. And then from there, it was like, okay, this is a thing and nobody knows about it. I have a cause. Here we go. I'm going to make the world aware of this idea of followership. So when I started teaching at Bar-Ilan, because as I finished my PhD, they quickly dragged me in to be a teacher and also the academic advisor and academic director of the international BA programs. And I was teaching, and I taught a seminar on leadership, strategy, and politics. And I made a point of focusing on the idea that if you're going out into the business world, if you're going out to do anything, it doesn't matter. You want to be in politics. You want to understand politics in business. Whatever it is, you're going to have to learn to be a good follower. Let's talk about what that means. Let's really examine this concept in depth. And then you can understand leadership. You can better understand how leadership works. And it really helps people to sort of fundamentally get to the core of the relationship that exists between a leader and the team, between different team members and things like that. And it was just a huge door opening up. And so that's sort of been where I'm at for the last 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow. God, that's fascinating. So you mentioned we could probably talk for an hour or two just about this paper that you wrote about these 3 states following the like you mentioned, the U.S. Lead. This, I guess, was around the invasion of Iraq, pre or post Iraq, I guess, at some point. Yeah. 20 years ago, 20 years ago.
It was really from it was like 1990 through 2005. So it was looking at like end of the Cold War when there was this huge worry that, states were going to get their hands, terrorist organizations were going to get their hands on WMDs all the way through basically Iraq. Yeah.
Fascinating. So you tied to that, I actually had an episode, months ago about VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And that whole concept of VUCA actually came about from the military having to deal with the collapse of the Soviet Union and all the nukes that were just spread all over, and all these state actors that you just have no idea how they're going to react. Are they going to be friendly? Are they not? And that idea of VUCA. So it's kind of fascinating. We've got sort of 2 now coming out of this post-Cold War kind of thing happening. It's really fascinating. So question about this idea of followership. So when you mentioned, when you first heard the term, you're like, that's not a thing. And I almost had the same reaction when you mentioned followership on that LinkedIn post. I was like, oh, I know leadership, of course, but followership. Tell us a little bit about followership and how you define it, because it's fascinating. I have so many things I want to dig into here. But I'd love to hear from your perspective. What is followership, and why should everybody out there care about it?
Okay, so basic definition of followership. Followership is the decision to ascribe to a process that supports and furthers the manifestation of a mutually defined purpose. Now, you go, wait a second, there's no leadership mentioned there. That's right, there's no leadership mentioned. You're ascribing to a process. You're ascribing to some future state that you want to see happen. And you say, I'm willing to support the idea of that future state, and I'm going to help manifest it. I'm going to work towards it. Now, what that means, you probably ascribe to democracy. You probably ascribe to capitalism. There are a lot of ideas that you ascribe to. And you go, I could ask you the question, well, who's the leader for those ideas? And you go, there isn't.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm willing to work towards them. I'm willing to participate in that process of making them real. So that's part of followership. Now, exemplary followership, or to take followership down into its nitty gritty, is about using that mutual purpose to act as the bond between leaders and followers. That mutual bond, that mutual purpose allows leaders and followers to work together and understand their role in that process. If you think about it, if followership is ascribing to that process, or if you want to say like exemplary followership is aligning and actively pursuing that process, right? And participating in the missions and supporting and furthering the manifestation of specific vision, objectives and goals, then leadership, on the other hand, is a process also. It's a process where one unit influences other units to act towards achieving and maximizing their efforts towards a mutually shared vision, objective, and goal, right? And so it's really about like the 2 sides to that mutual purpose And leadership's job is sort of like to guide process, and followership's job is to implement and make process real. That's what followership is. And we do it all the time. We in fact, we're exposed to followership from a very young age. It's one of the things our parents expect from us is to be good followers to start out. So it's almost like we're a leadership culture, but we need to start by we start out with followership. Like, do what I say. It's important. Follow my lead. Right. This is what we want from our kids. It's what we expect from our students. Teachers expect from their students. It's what coaches expect from their players. There's this concept here, and we just don't think it's something that needs to get taught. But the fact is that most of us need to learn it.
Right.
And we need to, it's a skill set that we can get better at. You can become a better follower, and you can learn how to speak truth to power. You can learn how to be courageous. You can learn, how to understand the frame that leader is giving you. And those are all really important things to know how to do. But if you don't teach it to somebody, they have to sort of guesswork at it. And quite frankly, most people aren't very good at getting it.
I imagine so. When I was first introduced to you, it was through this episode that I did about managing up. And you mentioned that a lot of those things in there were really kind of hitting on some of that followership. So I'm curious, if we talk about managing up, a lot of people have heard that term, I think, managing up. Can you talk a little bit about this idea of managing up versus followership and maybe compare and contrast? Are they different? Are they the same? Are there sort of overlaps, two different things?
They are not the same. No, not the same. And it's actually, I'm going to go with really important to recognize the difference between them.
Okay.
A follower doesn't necessarily want to or need to manage up, but there is a point in your followership where when you are an exemplary follower and you've created trust and you've established yourself and you've shown your leader that he no longer has to have hands-on with you and he can give you freedoms, then he may need you to manage up, because true managing up, real honest managing up, is about being able to go to your leader and say, I have a great idea. I need you to sponsor it. I need you to be my person who gets us the resources we need for it. That's what managing up should be, as opposed to the way people tend to think about managing up, which is, I need to get my manager off my back, right?
Leave me alone. I just want to do my work. Yeah.
Getting your manager off your back is not managing up. It's not. It's when you think about managing up, and most people, when they think about it, they go, it's really, I have a horrible manager, I'm going to get him off my back. No, managing up really is about being able to come to your manager and say, hey, I have this really great idea and I'm going to need X, Y, and Z for it. Or I'm going to need these people to be on, I need to take some time from these people to be able to get it done. And they go, oh yeah, go for it. Or they go, wait, let me just arrange things so that, let me manage things so that you can do that thing you want to do. That's managing up. Okay. Managing up is not trying to get a micromanager off your back. Trying to get a micromanager off your back is about discussing that fine line between command and control and mission control, and explaining, sort of working with your manager to figure out where they are in terms of their need for command and control versus your need for mission control, and sort of getting them to move towards yours, with you also being willing to move a little bit towards their sense of, I need to have updates. I need to know what's going on so I can have my finger on the pulse. But that's not managing up. That's more like, I need to work my relationship better with my manager. That's followership. That relationship that you're working on, that's followership. Understanding there's mutual purpose and then saying, well, I need you to trust me, right? If we talk about Lencioni's pyramid, right? Lencioni's pyramid is based fundamentally, the foundation of Lencioni's pyramid is based on trust. Patrick Lencioni created this pyramid. It's trust, and then you've got conflict, then you've got commitment, and then you've got, I don't remember, it starts with an A, and then there's results. I'm going to remember it in an hour and be like, I don't remember what it is. Anyway, the whole concept though is when someone micromanages, it makes people feel like they don't, like the leader doesn't trust them, right? And so that's a discussion you need to have with your leadership and say, listen, I want to be an exemplary follower, but part of that means I need you to trust me. I need you to have a good relationship with me. And so that any conflict we have is good conflict. It's conflict that comes to resolution with, some kind of commitment, some kind of, hey, even if I disagree with you, I'm gonna, yes, and I'm going to stop being devil's advocate at some point. I'm gonna play the game the way I need to play it. So there's a fundamental difference between managing up and followership. And I think followership really is about finding and maximizing the relationship with the leader and with your teammates, because you will end up following your teammates at points as well, because one of them will be an emergent leader on one project and one of them will be an emergent leader on another project, and suddenly someone will have an idea of what to have for lunch, and well, are we following that person or not? And you go, okay, all right, and you're gonna follow them. So that kind of followership doesn't just come out and it doesn't just get played out between you and the position leader, and which is why I don't like followership that's based on this idea of, oh, there's a position leader and then there's, followers. No, because you have emergent leaders in any group. And if you want to be a good follower, then you need to understand what that means. And you need to understand that there's a whole bunch of variables, like how engaged am I, and how much independent thinking am I bringing, and how much am I willing to pursue purpose and take independent action or, decisive action when it's necessary. And how much freedom do I have to do that, which is about the relationship with the leader. So there's a difference between managing up and followership. I think there's one more difference though that I think is really important. Managing up very often, because people think it's about like the nasty leader or the manager, and I think that's another thing we need to say. There's a fundamental difference between management and leadership.
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Managers, they are about the rules and about getting things done and about KPIs and OKRs and have resources and why are you using all my resources and all that fun stuff and timelines and timeframes and why are you leaving early? That's management. Leadership is about the process of getting us from here to there and seeing where there is and understanding each person's skill sets and maximizing those skill sets for that purpose and bringing out the best in people and growing them. Not to become better leaders, but to become better followers, to become better at what they are and what they're at. And this idea of like growing leaders is fundamentally wrong also. We don't need to grow leaders. We need to grow followers. They will then become, if they want to, because leadership is a choice, they will become leaders because they choose to take that leap away from the skills that they're doing into management and into leadership. And that's a whole different ballgame, because one of your UX guys, right, or girls jumps from doing junior UX and being really good at it to team lead, and now they are partially in management. Not all, like they dip their toe into management. Yep. They're suddenly dealing with resources and having to make sure other people are hitting their KPIs and their OKRs and goals and da-da-da. And all of a sudden, the skills that they've developed as a UX person aren't necessarily as applicable in that new role. But if they're good followers and they know how to follow well, then they also know how to align themselves with their management and how to translate that for their followers, because they understand how important it is for them. And that's a whole different mindset. Right. So I think that's another thing we need to understand. If we develop people as good followers, it means that they will be able to translate that skill set into management and leadership. But it doesn't necessarily have to go there. It's a choice.
So this actually reminds me, like almost an exact interaction that I had on LinkedIn about, I don't know, months ago. It actually sparked that episode that I did about leadership behaviors. I have some of these, an episode where I talk a lot about leadership behaviors and why this is really important. And again, I use the word leadership, but I think what I really probably should have said then, if I had known this word existed, was probably followership. But it came from a woman on LinkedIn who posted something very passionate about this. Like, I do not want to be a leader. Everybody tells me I need to lead and I have to be a leader, and I don't want to lead. I just want to do my work and I want to do a good job and I want to go home and I don't want to be a leader. And what I got to thinking was, that's really important, but you don't want to do that. And yes, not everybody can be a leader necessarily, but these skills, these behaviors are still very important for us to be able to be effective beyond just the technical skills, the hard skills that allow us to do our job. These soft skills, these behaviors allow us to take our work and influence and change minds and shape strategy and all these other things. And so after I heard all these things that you're saying, I went back and I thought, like, what this woman, it's unfortunate because she's probably never heard this term followership either, but she was really thinking in her head, like, everyone's telling me I should be a manager. Everyone's telling me I should lead a team. Everyone's telling me that I should go down this manager track and I don't want to, And so it's just really fascinating hearing you say a lot of these things, because it connects so many dots for me. Because at the end of the day, what this woman was saying was, I don't want to be a manager, but these behaviors are still something I need to learn. And, if I decide at some point I want to be a manager, what I'm hearing you say is, those behaviors will then translate to make me a better manager or better leader rather, if I decide to take that on, because I might want to stay an individual contributor or I might want to go into leadership. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts there. That was just a fascinating thing for me.
I'm a really firm believer in the idea that a business has got a problem and it's a leadership problem. In that the only way someone can advance is by taking on leadership or management roles. And that really hurts people who are choosing followership and would love to choose followership as their path. And don't want to take on responsibility for a team. They don't want to take on responsibility for other people hitting their goals. They don't want to take on responsibility for how resources are distributed, or that they want to be able to help use their skills to the best of their ability. And there's some companies that are doing that. I know a couple of people, for instance, who in their company, they've sort of been given this job of problem solver. And like, it's a job that as they sort of they'll like be called in for projects where their skills and their soft skills, like their hard skills, but also their soft skills, people know that when they come in, nobody's going to get offended. Nobody's going to be hurt because this person has got the best, interpersonal skills. And they come in not as a leader, but as a follower. They come in and say, well, I want to be an exemplary follower. I'm going to come in and I'm going to see what the problems are and sort of give new ideas and bring new ideas to the table and see how we can resolve any issues that have come up. And there are a couple of companies that have started doing this. And I think it's wonderful because what it does is you have different levels of problem solvers, just like you have, SDRs, and then you've got or if you want to do customer success, you've got, your basic customer success who you don't give them anything, right? Or junior UX. But then you've got your senior UX, and then you've got your UX leads, and then you've got your UX researchers, and you've got and there's levels of UX, right? So these problem solvers, these followers, they're amazingly good at with their followership, but they have no responsibility as a leader. And they still have place to move up. There's still room for them to be recognized and given both the financial recognition that goes along with it, but also the titles.
It lets them focus on their job
and
too,
this idea of moving up in some kind of hierarchy without the responsibility that goes along with management. And there are a lot of people out there who would love to have that in their business. And they don't even need to be problem solvers. They can just be the kind of person who, this person stays on this one team, but because of who they are, they sort of get this upgraded position or this upgraded understanding of who they are in the process or on the team. And I think that that's really a missing key point in business today. I think that a lot of businesses only have one track through which you can grow, or you can move up the ladder. And it does a disservice to the people who want to choose followership and want to choose to be followers or just don't see themselves as leaders or leadership potential.
And the other thing too that's interesting with this whole individual contributor having to move up in order to get a promotion or move up to leadership to get a promotion is you take these people who are really good at their core skill and then you put them in a role which they have no experience in. And you make these people, well, they're very good designers or they're very good software engineers. Let's make them managers. And suddenly they're not good at being a manager. They were good at this other thing, And then a lot of times, not always, obviously, but sometimes they end up being the micromanagers because they think, oh, well, I was the best at this. No one can do it as good as me. So then they end up being the people that micromanage. It's kind of fascinating conundrum there. I don't know, paradox, if you will, I guess, about moving people up like that.
I agree with you. And I think it's also because they don't know how to lead or manage. They don't know where they're supposed to be putting their time. And because of that, they're sort of lost. And the only thing they know how to do is the skills that they have, but those skills are no longer being used. So now they see their job as telling other people how to do their job. And that's not the role of management. That's not what management's supposed to do. Management and leadership, specifically leadership, is supposed to guide process. It's supposed to let people engage their own skills while the leader focuses on bigger picture and making sure that he understands what his leaders need from him so that he can make sure his people know what he needs from them. But it's not about, being the person who does the work. And even if you could have done it better than one of the people who you have underneath you, you shouldn't, because they will never learn without making those mistakes and without you learning how to give good feedback to them, right? One of the most important things I try and teach people who do followership work with me is how to give feedback to their leaders, because eventually if they choose a position of leadership, they will know how to give good feedback to their followers.
Oh, yeah.
It's really, really important. I call it peeing, right? It's not the sandwich, which like we all nobody likes to get the good, let me give you a critique and then some other good thing, and it doesn't feel good at all because
It's forced.
tastes like blah. But it's about being positive. It's then about, sort of explaining what things you sort of expect to go better, and then giving very clear sense of what those expectations look like in the future. So when you pee uphill, it trickles back at you.
Now, this leads me to this next piece I want to explore is followership skills, nurturing those followership skills. You mentioned how this leads a lot to leadership skills. And I'm curious if you could talk for a bit about how fostering those followership skills as a follower will enable you to be a better leader later, if you decide to go that route.
Sure. I think that there are a lot of followership skills that we could talk about, but I think it's very important to engage radical listening and radical candor as a follower. I love Radical Candor. And if you haven't read that book, that's another book I would suggest people read. Radical Candor's premise is that when you talk to someone and want to give them feedback and you want to engage them and get them involved in something or get to change their mind or whatever, you have to do it in a way that their ear will be able to hear what you're saying as a good thing. You actually have to think about how they are going to hear what you say and engage that. And radical listening is about taking that step back and saying, this person may not know how to engage radical candor. I need to engage with a process of deep listening so that I don't necessarily go, the moment they open their mouths and get triggered, but work past that trigger and see what is the core concept and idea that's being discussed. And then engage with that fundamentally and not try and figure out what my response is going to be right away. And those two together, for instance, are super important no matter where you are in the hierarchy. But for followers, they are so super duper important because when you are talking to your leader or when you are talking to a team member and you want them to work well with you, you have to engage radical candor. Have to. Otherwise, you are going to have fights and the conflicts will not look pretty, right? And if you want them to listen to you, it would behoove you to really listen to them. It's just an example, right? And that's one small example. If we're talking about followership skills, other followership skills, it's learning how to engage independent thinking. And that's, people go, of course I can engage independent thinking. Really? Because the moment you get onboarded somewhere, they're going to start teaching you this mantra and about who they are and what they do and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you are at some point going to become a robot. Unless you really do engage independent, critical thinking skills when problems come your way. And when you do that, you now need to express that in a way that shows support for leadership. Some of the great ones, instead of saying yes, but, use yes, and. That's a simple one. But most people, when they engage with a problem, yes, but no, wait, stop, time out. Yes, I accept the frame that you've given me, whether you're my leader, position leader, or you're my leader because right now you've expressed the idea and the idea is fundamentally sound and there's something that needs to get worked on. Okay, that skill, that very small skill of being able to say yes and, so important, or knowing when to stop being devil's advocate. Right. Have you ever had someone like this? Yeah. I'm guarantee you've had someone like this. You made a decision as a leader or you've seen someone like this. The leader's made a decision or you've made a decision. And yet there is still someone who is, I think there's a better way to do this. I think there's a better way to do this. And you go, but we've made a decision. We're moving on this.
We need to move forward, yeah.
You have to learn how to disagree and commit. And you have to learn when that fine line is between those. And it's something you can teach somebody. And it's something that leaders can teach their followers. One of the things I did with a friend of mine, he was having some problems with one of his followers. And he came to me and he was like, David, help. I've tried everything I can think of to get this guy to shut up and stop being this like hounding wolf on my heels. And I was like, oh, you've got one of those followers. Let's talk about that for a minute. And one of the ways you do that is by saying to that person, listen, I'm giving us a certain amount of time to discuss this. Please raise any issues. After this point, I really need you to disagree and commit for me and for us. Now you say that statement, you say it out loud as a leader. And all of a sudden, you've put them in a position of, wait a second, he's not saying I can't disagree, he's not saying I have to agree afterwards. He's simply saying that even though we've had the conflict, after the conflict is over and the decision has been made by leadership, because that's part of the job of leadership, right? At that point, the decision is no longer open for discussion or debate. We all have to be on board. And we have to align around whatever tactic, if we're talking low-level leader, or operative, operations, or strategy, if we're talking a higher level, leadership, they've decided. And we have to align with that and work to maximize within the frame that leadership has given us. Oh, I can say that to him? I said, yeah, you can say that to him. And when you do, give it clear time frame. Guys, you have 2 days to come up with different ideas. After that, this is no longer open for discussion. At that point, I'm going to be making a decision, and we're all going to have to commit to it.
I love that. Yeah.
Just so it's clear. And he did it. And you know what? All of a sudden, this guy who was yapping at his heels, first of all, he came up with a whole bunch of really cool ideas that sort of like gave breath to like the frame and expanded the frame. And the moment he did that, he was like, okay, wait, that allowed that my friend to say, you know what? I'm going to include this, and this from what you said. Now, the decision is as follows. We're going to go this way. Here's how we're going to do this. We're going to take this from you and this from you. And he took a little bit from everybody, right? And he was able to get everybody fit. And this guy, this alienated follower who was, the wolf nipping at his heels, became an exemplary follower overnight.
Wow.
And it was amazing because all of a sudden he was willing to take proactive actions, and not just on the things he thought were important, but on things that he had originally disagreed with, because he said, I committed to this. And when my friend went back afterwards, after the project was done, and said, okay, I saw that you were willing to put in the time and energy on things that you didn't necessarily agree with. Why? He said, I committed to something, which means if we're going to do this, I have to do it. I'm part of that. I have to go in 100%. And I think that that's a really important way. And those are followership skills, right? Those are aspects of followership that you then translate into leadership. And the way you talk to followers is by giving them the skills they need in order to understand boundaries and understand the frame that you want them to work within.
I love that. You mentioned something else too that I think is really important, and this is critical thinking. And there's a debate right now going on amongst the UX education community. And part of the problem is UX, these boot camps, if you've probably heard of some of these boot camps, but they will teach a process, that you do this step, then this step, then this step, then this step. And part of our job as UX designers often is to come in and ask really hard questions and question everything and, 5 whys and all these things.
I love 5 whys.
Yeah. And the critical thinking piece is really a cornerstone for a really great UX professional. And a lot of times our education system doesn't necessarily teach that critical thinking skill. That's something that you tend to learn on the job or as you go or through life or whatever.
Well, I want to, let's backtrack for a second. Hold on.
Yeah, sure.
I want to backtrack. So these boot camps, they are not teaching UXR. Let's be really clear about what they are teaching.
Sure.
Right? They are teaching someone how to do design.
How little D design, yeah.
Yeah, little D design.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like user experience. They're not teaching people how to really engage in the deep thinking that goes along with understanding the user. And that's a really important difference between these boot camps and someone who is really interested in engaging in UX. And I think that that's a fundamental difference that you need to make is when someone goes through a boot camp, and I think businesses should be aware of this, when someone's coming to you from a boot camp, you shouldn't expect from that person the ability to do deep thinking about UX. Because first of all, they don't have the experience, but more importantly, the education that they got wasn't about that. It's not what the boot camps are designed to teach. I know that there are people who do UX in university, for instance. That's a whole different ballgame. Because when you learn UX in university, and design in university, they go pretty far in depth into the idea of critical thinking skills and about, applying, truth to power and being able to come in and express, real interest in why are we doing this? The 5 whys and the what ifs. I love going 5 whys and then 5 what ifs. Why? Well, what if we did this? Well, what if we did that? Well, what if we did this? Well, what if we did that?
I love that.
And then you work through that process. So I think it's really important for people who are coming out of the boot camps to also be aware of that. Or the people who are thinking about doing one of these boot camps to be aware of what it is they will get and what it is they won't get from the boot camp. And I think that that's super important on both ends. I think businesses need to be aware of it. And I definitely think The people who are doing it need to be aware of it. So I just wanted to make that point. I think that's an important. And I think that when you talk about these junior people who are coming out of a boot camp, one of the things that they should try and learn and pursue on their own is critical thinking skills. That's something that you can learn. It's something you can learn on your own. There are courses on it even, but learning critical thinking skills and learning how to express what you've found in the right way are super important skills to have. And knowing when it's a good idea to express truth to power, which is another followership skill, is knowing, not just being able to and having the courage to, but knowing when to.
So that leads me to the next thing I want to talk about, because when you hear the term followership, it's got the word follow right in there, right? And so what I imagine a lot of people think of, at least when I first heard it, and again, this is probably not somewhat of a common term, I think, so people might be hearing this for the first time, is, a follower just follows. They blindly follow. They listen to what someone says and they do it. And I've heard you say this several times since we started talking, is speaking truth to power, being courageous, which to me does not imply simply following orders, right? That's sort of not the opposite of the I don't know what the opposite of courageous would be, the weak thing to do perhaps. But so talk a little bit about this. When you think about followership, it's not, following, it's having critical thinking, understanding what you're supposed to do and act on it. So could you speak a little bit to that, at least that piece about, followership being seen as sort of just following?
Look, we don't want to be sheeple. We don't want to have sheeple in our lives or in our teams. Sheeple are dangerous. They need a lot of prodding, and they tend to follow the loudest bell, which is very dangerous. And to be clear, if you look at Robert Kelly's followership grid, he defines you've got sheep, you've got yes men, you've got alienated followers, then you've got exemplary followers, and then you've got your pragmatists. And the sheep are the ones you kind of need to prod along to get them moving. And I think every team's got, not every team, but most teams have got one of those or two of those on there somewhere. But we're also not looking for robots. It's really interesting. If we go to the military for a second, we think about the military for a second. The military for a very long time functioned on the concept of command and control. That is, the leader, the officer, the sergeant, whoever it may have been, who was in charge of a mission, he had to have absolute control of that mission. He had to know everything that was going on. Everything had to be based on his command. You weren't allowed to do things on your own. There was no independent action. There was no independent thinking taking place. Over the last 25, 30 years, a lot of the Western militaries have moved far away from that towards something called mission control. And that's the idea that I'm going to tell you where I want us to go and why we want to go there, which gets us into Simon Sinek's why and why that's so important. And then it's your job as the follower, as the person who's underneath me, to give me how you're going to get there and what it is you're going to need in order to make that happen. And then it's my job to make sure you have that if I can give it to you. Followers are not sheeple. Fundamentally not sheeple. Some of them will sometimes be sheep. It happens. But this idea that being a follower is a bad thing. I have a question. How many followers do you have on LinkedIn?
I don't know off the top of my head. 4,000 something-ish. Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Wow. A lot more than I do. But they're what? What are they called?
Followers? Connections. Connections.
Really?
What are they called? Connections. No.
You got connections
and you've connections and followers, right? Yeah.
Followers, right? You got followers and you got connections. And on Facebook?
Friends?
You got your friends.
Yeah, friends, yeah.
And on a page, you've got a follower. And on YouTube, you follow. And on this, you follow, right? So it's almost like we think of followers as sheep. But on the other hand, you know what? These followers, a lot of times, are actually people who are looking for a relationship.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
Right? They're looking to have some kind of, it might be a one-way relationship, but some of the best followers on TikTok and Snapchat, are the people who write notes and write
comments,
comments, and you love it. And that gives you a relationship with these people, and you love your followers, and it's so much fun to have followers who respond and tell you what they think, and then you have these comments, and you call like, what? And then all of a sudden we start getting on podcasts with each other.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing.
Followers fundamentally are looking for a relationship on some level. And that relationship is based on mutual purpose or a mutual idea. There's something that brought us together. It may be that we disagreed about something and that led to a followership relationship where one of us had an idea and then I was like, I disagree with that idea. And then that relationship sort of builds and that person is speaking truth to power and saying, look, you may be an authority figure on this. I disagree with you. Here's why. And let's talk about it. And I think that that's really, really important, is that this idea that followers are sheep is fundamentally based on some idea that we have that being a follower is bad, but it's not. You're more likely to be a follower than you are a leader in 90% of your relationships.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And so if that's the case, then why is it that we think followership is bad? And the answer is because the West has become a leadership-centric culture. That is something which has happened over the last 70 years, 80 years.
Like the famous CEO, the celebrity CEO is sort of this. People write books about Elon Musk and Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and the guy who owned GE or ran GE for a long time. That's fascinating. You mentioned that. You think about it now. Who writes a book about a middle manager?
And the answer is I do, maybe. but that's the thing is like we've become this. I mean, if we think about it, we were talking about it before. Move up the ladder, it's based on this idea of management and leadership. We've become so centralized on this. It used to be that people would have a job and they would stay in that job for 20, 30, 40 years. And most of them would not want to move up or seek any kind of moving up in their station. They just wanted to do their job to the best of their ability and go home with their paycheck at the end of the day. Yeah. And they were happy with that. And then something changed. I can't put my finger on what it is. I bet if I went through and did some research about it, I probably could. But
that'd be a fascinating book or article for sure. I'd read that.
I think it would. Like when did we become leadership centric and why? And I'm sure someone's done something on it. I just don't know about it off the top of my head. But I do think that culture has seeped into so many different places in our lives. That is what makes us think followers are sheep. Followers are bad.
Oh, interesting.
And my worry is that if we continue with that, and part of the reason why I am so adamant about bringing followership to the table and saying, listen, if you want me to teach leadership, we're going to start with followership. That's where we're starting.
I love it.
Base level. When I go in and do a workshop, first things we talk about are followership and strategy, because your followers need to understand tactics, operations, and strategy. They need to understand the difference and what the focus is going to be at each of those levels. And now we can talk about how leadership translates that and aligns with that and makes that possible for the followers at each level. And when we talk about sheep or robots, which is even worse, I'm reading a book right now, and the guy mentions lemmings. I don't know if you're old enough. Do you remember the game Lemmings? It was this game.
No, I don't think.
Okay. It was this game you could play where like you would control these creatures and they would just do exactly what you told them to do. And they would move exactly as you told them to move. And you would give them these like paths and they would do the math. And that was it. And it's basically thinking about your people like robots and followers like robots and these lemmings who they just have to follow a specific path and that's what they're going to do. But humans aren't like that. It's not in human nature to want to be a robot or to be treated like a sheep. Most people don't like being prodded either. Neither orally. They don't like being criticized. They don't like being called out. They don't like being made to feel like they're not doing their job or they're not doing their work. And it's one of those things where, one of the worst things a manager or leader could do is to do that in public, right? Is to call someone out and make them feel like a sheep in public. Because you've basically taken that person and you've made them, public enemy number one. Because now they're also a drain on the team and everyone sees them that way and like all the things that go along with it.
That's fascinating. The team dynamic, plus you're feeling like, slighted in some way, right? And then the rest of the team now sees you as sort of the reason why they're not. So there's this sort of us versus them thing going on. That's fascinating. Yeah.
Which gets into the whole concept of like in crowds and out crowds and like all kinds of stuff that happens like that. And there's a whole bunch of research called LMX research into in crowds and out crowds and how they impact effectiveness on teams and what they can do to teams. And it's really intense when someone is called out and then that becomes the blame game starts happening and everything seems to fall on that person's shoulders. But if you really went back and look at things, it's not all on them. And so it's a very interesting thing that I am trying very hard to get people to move away from is this idea that followers are sheep. We're humans. We're not sheeple. We deserve to be treated better.
Absolutely. So it's a really interesting point you made about the military and the military of 30 years ago versus the military of today. I interviewed a former U.S. Marine a couple months back, Andrew Rice. And we had this interesting conversation. We were talking about going from the military to a creative industry. We're in the tech sector, where generally speaking, it's more flat. These startups tend to be more flat and stuff, right? And we ended up with saying, it's actually not too dissimilar to the current way the military works, where it's not really command and control anymore. The NCOs on the ground are really given a lot more freedom to do what they think is right. And we're kind of comparing that to, I don't know how we ended up getting in the war in Ukraine, but comparing the way that the West has trained the Ukrainian military to have these sort of NCOs on the ground to make decisions where they are versus, the general, the 5-star general making decisions and having to phone those orders all the way through to the Russian troops on the ground. And you can kind of see how much better that management style is working for one side versus the other. And it's kind of fascinating to think about. And you made that same comparison. It's kind of validating some of the things we said, but that's just like a fascinating thing. The military realized that top-down thing doesn't work, but still there's a lot of companies that still feel like that would work. And it's like, well, if these Western powers and these governments realize that that's not working for them, why would you assume it's going to work for your little company, So it was a fascinating point.
Okay. So I'm not dissing hierarchy. Hierarchy is important. Like, you do need people who are taking responsibility and are the buck stops here people at each level. You do need that. So I want to make that really clear. I do think there should be, to my mind, there are 5 levels to a hierarchy. If we look at the military, if we look at, there's all kinds of different researchers suggests somewhere between 3 and 5 levels, right? If we take Simon Sinek, he suggests that the why, how, what can be looked at as a pyramid and a hierarchy of organization. But if we look at the military's got your grand strategy. That's the politicians who are above the military but are directing overall concepts of strategy, where we want to go. And then you got your strategic level. They give ideal types. This is what I would ideally like to see, given, if all the things could work exactly as I wanted, and here's how many resources I'm willing to put to that, make that real. Then you got your operations, your tactical, and then your techno-tactical levels. Techno-tactical is the guy with the keyboard who's writing the code, if we're talking about a business. Okay? Tactics are the people who are maneuvering. They're the people who are the team leads, and, the guys who are like making sure that things are moving correctly and moving around. If we think about those levels, each level has its own focus. And it's important to have those levels and that focus. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that a mission has to be run from the top down. It means that once the objective has been set, once vision has been set, once an objective has been set, and then the next level down is given free rein to try and meet that objective to the best of their ability, given the resources they've been given. And now it's up to them. It's no longer, I'm going to tell you each step that I want you to do. I'm not going to micromanage you along the way. You have free rein once I've given you, here's objective. Now break it down into the goals you think are right. You can come back at me if you have questions about those goals, or if there's something that's not clear about the objective, or if you think you need more resources, or in the very rare situation where you come back and tell me, hey, I have too many resources here, let me give some back to you. But it's not that hierarchy is a bad thing. It's that the hierarchy itself understands that at each level, once it's gone down a level, it's no longer mine to control, it's mine to guide. And that's what's interesting about leadership. It's about influencing the units underneath you to move towards that vision or objective or goal. Dean Meyer has a really interesting book where he describes a company that is essentially based on the concept of small entrepreneurial sections in the company. Each group in the company is its own entrepreneurial section, and they provide for people, for other groups inside the organization, or they provide for customers outside, or for allies and partners outside. But the company, those small little groups are their own little business, and it's their job to think entrepreneurially and provide for these other. And it's a wonderful way to think, and it's a wonderful culture to establish in an organization, because it allows for mission control.
Right.
Because it allows for exemplary followership to take place, critical thinking, proactive action, active engagement, levels of active engagement, thinking outside the box, or however you want to talk about it, or expanding the frame, right? Or things like that, or dashboarding, like being able to provide feedback in the most effective manner. All of those things happen when you let the people who are given a job do their job.
Well, what's really interesting in that aspect too is you've got these little entrepreneurial teams that kind of function as their own little individual, companies, but they're part of a larger company. So the leader of that little group is still a follower. They're a leader for that group, but they're a follower for the larger group, right? The larger company. So there's sort of like this dynamic of being a good leader, being a good follower at the same time, and which is probably always true, unless you're the CEO. But even then, you mentioned...
Nope, you're wrong. You're wrong. You're still a follower.
Oh, see, I was going to say, even then, you're still a follower of that capitalist system or the democracy system or that system that company belongs in.
Or your board of directors, or your board of directors, or your customer.
Yeah,
right? If you think about it, most CEOs, when they get down to it, who are they following? They're following a board of directors, or they're following their customers, or they're following the trends of their field.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And leaders in their field, unless they're the leader in their field. Like Steve Jobs, I don't know who he was following, but I'm going to guess he was following something. I could probably figure something out along the way, but he was a follower still.
Of something, sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Or you're following your stockholders. Like everybody's a follower in some way, or you're following your wife.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Sure.
You're following somebody. But yeah, in the hierarchy itself, everybody's a follower, including the CEO on some level. And it's interesting. Where some research was done, they went to a whole bunch of executives and they asked them, how important is it to be a follower? And 92% of them were like, this is super important on every level of the organization. And these are these are C-suite executives. The problem is the C-suite executives don't trickle that down to anybody else.
Right,
and that was one thing else they found is that while they think that, they don't speak that.
Oh, fascinating.
Right? It's like walk the walk, talk the talk.
This leads me to a question I'm curious about from your perspective. So when I get all these questions, I'm curious about all these things. I don't know why. I preface them as saying it, but so in a UX, often we work in cross-functional teams. We work with people in product teams, engineers, stakeholders, whatever, customers, and all these things. So as UX designers, we work in these cross-functional environments, and I'm curious from your perspective. It's again thinking more like horizontally. How do we apply followership in those scenarios where, like you mentioned before, there's no leaders? But some of these followership type of behaviors that might benefit those cross-functional relationships. Is that something you've ever thought about?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. In fact, it's something I recently had a discussion with a friend of mine. And he actually came to me because he was being asked to represent his team on a committee that was being held about breaking down some silos that existed in their organization. He wasn't sure how much freedom he was going to have based on what the management had sort of said to him. And he wasn't sure what he should do. And I said, well, listen, you're acting in agency. And he said, what? I said, you have to remember that as a follower, when you go to another team and you say, hey, we need this, or this is what we think, you are acting in agency for your leader and for your team. Now that's an act of a followership. When you act in agency for others, you are acting as a follower. Now you may be guiding process outside of your small group, where you somehow take the lead of that discussion that's taking place, or you bring your ideas and you want those ideas to be the fundamental core ideas that get ascribed to and change that horizontal relationship. But functionally, you are acting in agency for your team and for your leader. That act is an act of followership, which means you have to understand what it is your team and leader want from you so that you can act independently in that meeting. It means that you have to present what your leader wants, but also what you think is best without having to check in with your leader on a regular basis, which means you have to be able to understand the end goal of what it is what's the purpose that you're being sent for? Well, that purpose is part of what binds you to your home base. And it's also part of the reason why you've gone out of your home base to have that crosstalk take place. So when UX goes and talks to engineers, right, they're acting in agency for UX teams. And they're acting in order to get the engineers and to get, back end and to get DevOps to ascribe to some of the ideas that UX wants to see come to fruition and that they need support for, right? Which means you're acting as a follower, but you're acting as a representative of team. That doesn't put you in leadership. That means you're still a follower, right? But you are trying to guide process, which means you are trying to get your team, which is one of the reasons why I like the idea of not saying people when we say follower leaders. When I said leadership before, right? What did I say? It's a process in which one unit influences other units. Well, that means that UX team is now trying to lead DevOps and engineering and towards some kind of vision, some objective, some goal, right? So you are acting as agent and representative of that, but you're really representing a whole team. And that whole team has expectations and wants and desires that they want these other teams to follow. I want to call it ad hoc hierarchies or ad hoc.
Kind of dynamic. It changes. It's fluid over time.
It's that follower leadership bond that sort of changes And it happens a lot at that, when you're talking about it's us and them, or it's, within that level of that hierarchy. And you're just like, but it's really us and them. But I want to be a little bit above them in this relationship, or I want to be the leader in this relationship who sort of guides process. And I want them to follow process and align with my process and be exemplary in how they help us execute process here, because that would make it wonderful. And UX needs to learn how to do that, quite frankly, because there are so many apps out there and programs out there and websites out there that suck because UX can't get their foot in the door and get people to follow them. And, the engineers think they know best, and DevOps thinks they know best, and data thinks they know best. And UX goes, but you guys don't understand how this feels for the user. The user's experience sucks. You might want to listen to us.
I know, seriously.
And it's also a function of power. We all have the ability to engage power. Followers engage power with leaders just as much as leaders engage power with followers. It's just a question of how that power is expressed. And there's different forms of power out there. There's coercion and manipulation and persuasion and influence. Those are the major categories, and they can break them all down. But followers can coerce leaders. If you don't do what I'm saying, I'm going to quit.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're a key figure on a project, and if you quit, that project's going to get delayed for the next, you've now, you've put the crux on to say, this is so fundamentally important to me as a follower that you as leadership need to listen to me, or else. If you do that, is it dangerous? Sure, of course, because they can always say goodbye, but you can do it. Followers can do that. Leaders do it all the time. Managers do it all the time. PIP, you're being put on, you're being pipped.
You're being pipped. You got a pip. Watch out.
You're pipped.
Yeah.
Watch out. And the idea that pipping is supposed to lead to firing as opposed to actually helping the person become a better follower is absolutely absurd.
It's the reason, it's the evidence we need to fire you, essentially, is what I've seen when we do a pip. It's never, it's progress improvement is what we say, but it's really just, it's a funnel for firing. Yeah.
That's not what I mean. That's not what I mean. Which is so bad, because really, if you want progress improvement, let's talk followership. But yeah, anyway, across that idea of there's a word for it, and I'm
cross-functional?
Cross-functional teams, or the idea of breaking down silos, and the idea of trying to really get multifunctional teams working, multifunctional teams together, or to get representatives from different teams to sort of have those meetings that allow for that crosstalk to take place. Each of those people who sits to that meeting is acting as an agent and an advocacy for their home base. And so that's an act of followership.
Yeah.
And it's the person you want to send better know what the leadership wants. Because if they don't, they're going to come back and not have it.
Yeah, it's interesting. What I'm reminded of too is kind of what you said in the very beginning when you said, even when you're not talking about a leader being present, there's still a greater good there. There's still, a greater, something bigger than yourself that you're following, right? Whether that's, democracy or capitalism or religion or whatever it is, there's no specific leader that might be present. And it's kind of the same way I feel like when you have these cross-functional teams, we have a representative from each team. Maybe there's not CEO standing there looking over our shoulder, but we're there to represent the greater good. And we are there and we trust each other and we're kind of following that sort of vision for the company or the strategy that somebody has kind of
that mutual purpose, right? It's that mutual purpose. Why are we all here together? Well, we want to make the business work better, or we want to improve how likely we are to achieve the objectives that we've set for this quarter or this year, or we want to see what is it we need to do in the future in order to establish and really pursue vision. And that mutual purpose is what binds those people together. And it allows certain people to emerge as leaders who haven't been declared as a leader. Nobody there has been declared as a leader, but sometimes that person's idea will sort of rise up to the top and go, okay, we're going to follow this way because it speaks to us in those terms of mutual purpose. And it's really, really cool when that happens.
So let me ask you this. When you have a team or a leader or someone who does not share that purpose or is maybe just a bad leader, maybe they share the purpose, but they're just not good. How does a good follower deal with a bad leader or bad follower using some of these courageous followership practices?
Okay, so I think that I want to just differentiate between a couple of things. First of all, the book you spoke about at the very beginning, Courageous Follower, he makes a really clear point, and I think it's very important. If what the leader is asking you to do does not fall within the realm of immoral, illegal, something that goes against some very clear values that you hold, then your argument for I'm not going to do that sort of declines.
I see. Yeah. You don't have a moral argument against it. Yeah.
You can say, I'm against it. I don't think this is a good idea. But at some point, they're allowed to put their foot down and say, disagree and commit.
Same. Yeah. Your example from before. Right.
And that's important. I want to just make that clear before we get into like bad leaders or you know, bad managers or bad followers.
Fair enough. So we'll differentiate then, not necessarily a person you disagree with, but an actual bad leader who's not doing something that they should.
Right. So that's where I want to I want to just make that differentiation there.
Perfect.
There are people who are doing things that are immoral, whatever. Don't follow them.
Quit. Get out. Yeah. Run away before you end up under investigation.
Or call the cops or bring it to higher authority. Figure out how to do that. Get a lawyer. Get lawyered up. Make sure you know what you're doing. But that's not what we're talking about here. I just want to make that clear. When we're talking about someone who is a bad leader, micromanager, or let's differentiate here as well, bad manager or bad leader. Bad leader, that's someone who's bad at expressing vision. They're bad at seeing the skills of the people and utilizing those skills efficiently. They're bad at understanding how people work and how best to engage them. They're bad at the relationship. They're bad at translating what higher management wants from them and what they need to translate for their people below them. That's bad leadership. Okay? And those types of bad leadership, those are things that you can resolve. One of my favorite things to do with people is to have them create a working manual. This is how I work.
Okay.
And it's my own personal manual, my work manual. And I say to people, when you get into your next one-on-one, please let the manager and leader know that you are going to be having, one of the things you want to talk about is, ideal working practices for you. And you go with that working manual and you go into that meeting with that working manual. And you talk to them about what puts you into flow, what takes you out of flow. When are your best work times? What kind of feedback do you like to get, and how is the best way to give it to you? Do you like it right at the spot at the moment, or would you prefer to get it later on, unless it's an emergency situation? Are you the kind of person who needs to have their coffee in the morning? Are you the kind of person who no, seriously, I had a person who on her manual very specifically wrote, don't talk to me about problems until I've had my first coffee. Oh my God, one of her workers, a month and a half later, walks in and goes, I need you to have this. And then she goes, it's a cup of coffee. And she goes, I need to talk to you about something, but you need to have that first. And then she walked out of the office and the woman was like, oh man. And she's like, okay, fine. Bad. It's going to be good. She drinks. But it was cute. It was awesome. But he acknowledged the point. Like, I need my coffee before we have that discussion. And she had her coffee. Yeah. They had the discussion, and it was wonderful because it made it possible to have the discussion. And it was a hard discussion to have. She said afterwards, she felt good about the fact that her follower, knew how to work with her and knew what she needed to be able to deal with that issue on the morning, like as a first in the morning thing to deal with. And we can do that. You can have a working manual. And if you walk in and you say to your manager, listen, I think I have the skills to do A, B, C, and D. And I noticed that you've been really interested in how I'm doing that. I'm curious if you think that I could be given a project where I demonstrate those skills and then I check in with you at a certain time frame without you checking in with me to see if I've got those skills down well. You've now just acted in as an exemplary follower and a courageous follower without managing up. Does that make sense?
Managing up would be informing them and all those other things, right?
Yeah. Informing, you would be going to them and going, listen, I think we should do this project. And I think that if you could give me that, no. It's you going to them and saying, hey, I think I've got these skills down. I'm wondering if you feel like I could have the freedom to do that on a project to see how I'm doing. And now you're saying, you're testing those waters. And by doing that, what you're doing is you're showing that you understand the leader's issue, why they're a bad leader, or you're making an assumption, which can make an ass of you and me, but it's not a bad one. Like if the person is micromanaging, one of the reasons they may be doing it is because they don't necessarily have the capacity to judge your skill set. Either they're not, they may have better skills than you do, or they may just feel like they need to have their finger on the pulse. And all you have to do is have that conversation with them. And that can deal with the bad leader. Bad followers is like when you're dealing with bad teammates, it's harder because bad teammates is about things like free riding, or bandwagoning. And then it's a whole different ball game because there it's about how it makes the whole team feel. It's the water cooler effect. It's when, coffee break's supposed to be 15 minutes and you see that person still having their coffee 15 minutes later. And it's been like a half hour. You're like, what the bleep? Why are you not? Here's the thing. I think that that's a function of trust. And when you talk about that, it's about how that trust leads to commitment, and it leads to being able to acknowledge when someone is actually doing their work and when they're not actually doing their work. And so those are discussions you can have with leadership as well. But you need to do it in a way which is about how you feel the team is going, not about that person. And that's a big one. It's about not talking about that person, but it's about what the team needs and how the team needs to respond. But it's also something you can do by going to that person and saying, I got to let you know this is how we're feeling, or this is how I'm feeling. It's not cool. And that takes a great deal of courage to go up to one of your teammates when you are not the leader and say, listen, this is how you've been making me feel with the way you've been behaving as a teammate. And it's causing conflict that I don't want to have. And it's hard for me to trust you. And the moment you open the word, that statement is such a powerful, powerful statement to say to someone.
Hard for me to
when
trust
you go up
you.
to someone and say, listen, it's hard for me to trust you. Even when you commit, it's hard for me to trust you, because I've seen that even when you commit, you don't actually take, ownership of what it is you said you would do. And it's that broken trust is making it much more difficult for me to, work with you. And I really want to rebuild that trust. How can we do that? Right. That puts someone back on their heels a little bit, but it's such a powerful, powerful statement.
One of the things that I'm hearing too, a lot of the stuff that you've mentioned, is this idea of emotional intelligence and being able to approach those situations in a way that, doesn't end up with you yelling or screaming or insulting them in any way or getting defensive one way or another. Emotional intelligence seems to be a huge part of this whole idea of followership as well, leadership as well, but really followership in this context. Being able to recognize your faults, being able to improve your faults, being able to recognize what you're doing and how you're influencing the situation and those kinds of things.
EI, emotional intelligence, is one of those things that everybody needs it. It's something that everyone needs to work on, and it's not something that's set in stone. They say that IQ, at some point, your IQ is sort of set. And I've heard people say that emotional intelligence is something that you kind of get set, and that's how you're going to be and whatever. But neuroplasticity suggests otherwise. Just that idea that the brain can continue developing and learning, which means that you can continue developing and growing and learning, means you can raise your EI, your emotional intelligence factor. And the way to do that is by learning to be a great listener, first and foremost. But emotional intelligence, one of my favorite things to help someone teach emotional intelligence is to play the game Mirror. And I'll do this sometimes at workshops. It's where one person will play act a role, and then the other person will mirror that person's emotions and that person's tone of voice and that person's expressions, and not necessarily all the body movements, but some of the body movements that the person engaged in. And we'll go through different ones, like this is your boss and you're the follower. Your boss just came in and was super, super excited about something. She just got informed that you've been given a new task, and it's something she's super excited about. Now your first response to it in your head is, oh crap, I don't want to have this extra work on my head, but she's super excited about it. What do you do? And the answer is you mirror her.
Oh, wow.
You mirror her excitement. And by mirroring that excitement, what you do is you put yourselves in a similar frame of mind, even though you are not there emotionally. And that emotional intelligence to do that capacity to do that, will help your emotional intelligence grow, because you will start feeling the way she feels. And you may never like the job that she wants you to do, but you will understand more about where she's coming from when she comes in and makes requests for you. You will understand better what it is that's driving her demands or her goals and how she's framing things. And it's the same thing with people who come in upset, right? Someone comes in upset and you don't know why. And they're showing you that grumpy. And you just got to go, oh man, grumpy. And you got to sort of show that grumpy. You got to do it with your face, and you got to do it with your body, and you got to try and exaggerate it a little bit. And by exaggerating it, you learn emotional intelligence. And when you do that, then when you get into real life situations, okay, you're not going to be quite so exuberant or quite so grumpy, but you will have had that practice of mirroring what that person feels, and that will engage empathy. Because empathy is about feeling what the other person feels. I feel you. It's not about seeing things the way they see things. It's about feeling things the way they feel things. And emotional intelligence has a lot to do with empathy. So yeah, I think it's a very important part of followership. I think it's a very important part of leadership. I think it's a huge part of parenting.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You
I
know,
learned
your
that
kid
the hard
comes in
way.
grumpy and you're putting on all smiles. Oh, cheer up. That's not the way to deal with that. Hey, you know, grump with them and be good. You know, it's a good ear for them to grump back at you. So yeah, I'm a firm believer in practicing emotional intelligence and improving it and working on it. And I've got a long way to go on my own.
Yeah,
Like I can
don't
admit
we all?
that.
I think that's a high. I think that's a high mark of or a mark of high emotional intelligence to realize that. So I think you're
Yeah.
doing okay. So one last question before we get out of here: resources anywhere. If anybody wants to go and learn more about followership, what are some resources that you like that you think are worth calling out?
Besides my website,
We'll link it to in the
which
show
I'm
notes.
gonna
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
put it there.
Yeah.
Make sure that's there because that's important. Which has leadership and a little bit about leadership and followership and stuff in that. There are a whole bunch of books out there. You mentioned Irish Olive's The Courageous Follower. A couple of other books. One of them is a book that I'm actually reading right now. It's called Embracing Followership, which really does talk about the idea of not wanting to be a leader and accepting that being a follower is okay and that it's totally legit. There are a couple of other books out there. Leadership is Half the Story is one of them. Barbara Kellerman's Followership book. Those will give you a lot of theory. Some of them are more guidebooks. The Courageous Follower, Leadership is Half the Story, Embracing Followership are more like self-help guidebooks on how to be a good follower versus Barbara Kellerman or Robert Kelly's Followership books, which are a little bit more technical. There's also a book which is essentially a whole bunch of journal articles that have been put together. It's called The Art of Followership, which I've read it a couple of times. It's got a lot of great stuff in it. But really, I think that someone who wants to be a good follower doesn't necessarily need to read about followership. They need to read about things like radical listening and radical candor, and they need to learn about, empathy games. And they need to learn about things like, yes, and the 5 whys. And there's so much out there that you could, if you just comment almost anything that people have written nowadays about UXR, for instance, UX research, and you say, well, how would you apply followership? The idea of how would I express that to leadership? And if you ask that question, even you're already looking at it through followership's eyes, and that will change the way you frame the discussion. And that in and of itself is followership. And I think that's important. I think UX has a place, like fundamentally UX needs to be able to do that really well.
Totally
so
agree,
if we're
yeah.
talking to UX people out there, learn followership, but more than anything, think about how are you applying the followership mindset to how you're bringing whatever you want to bring to the table, because you want leadership to acknowledge that you have worth and what you're bringing to the table is worthwhile to engage with.
And what's your website so everybody can go and find you online?
My website is www.drDleitner.com.
That's right. And you've got some awesome stuff you post on LinkedIn. So follow Dr. D on LinkedIn. I'm going to link to his LinkedIn and all these other links in the show notes. Make sure you check that out. And also you got some great YouTube content as well. A lot of videos and stuff that you've posted on YouTube. So make sure you check out Dr. D. He's got some awesome stuff. And if you can, send us those links that some of those books and stuff you talked about, and I'll make sure to get those in the show notes for everybody as well.
You got it.
So you have a few minutes to stick around. I got a few questions I like to ask all my guests to get help our listeners out there get to know all our guests a little bit better. So these are just 5 simple questions. First thing that comes to your head. And normally I actually ask about design related, or I'm talking to design folks. So I ask these questions about design related things or non-design related things. This time I'm going to ask you about non-followership related things. So what's your favorite non-followership related book?
Non-followership related book. Ooh. Can I go with like a whole genre?
Yeah, shoot, go for it.
I'm really into fantasy.
Okay.
I love fantasy. I've been into Terry Pratchett and his sarcastic fantasy world, the Discworld, for a very long time. But there's a lot of fantasy out there that I'm all for. That plus Star Wars.
Star Wars, all right.
And like Star Wars, like the books, like the extended universe before they took over with the new stuff. I have all the books.
Okay.
So
right on.
Yeah, that's.
So I'm really into Star Trek. Personally, if you ask me Star Trek versus Star Wars, I'm always going to pick Star Trek.
Legit.
But my wife and kids, they always get me Star Trek books for for my birthday and for Father's Day and stuff. So Anyway, I got a whole
Nice.
stack of these books. I haven't read all of them, but I love that stuff too. That's what I love about the extended universe stuff. Because like for me, Star Wars, it's just like a few movies. Well, now it's I guess 9, and well, other movies they've started to do. But one of the things I really liked about Star Trek was like the universe was so much bigger because they had so many episodes, you know, so you introduce more characters. But that's cool about like with the Star Wars books because you get to introduce and meet all those characters through the books, not necessarily the movies. So I love that. It's really awesome. All right. What is your favorite non-followership related podcast?
Non-followership related podcast. A friend of mine is doing a podcast on millennials in tech.
Oh, okay.
And it's really cool. She just started. Her name is Sivan. I think it's called Millennials in Tech. And it's been really cool. So that one is one that I've been enjoying a lot. If another one which I enjoy a lot, but it comes from my own, like my faith as a religious Jew. The organization called Aleph Beta has a couple of podcasts that they put out, which are very cool about the weekly Bible readings that we have for religious Jews, and also on like the whole book of Genesis and stuff. And those are pretty cool. So those are my favorites.
Cool. All right. What is your favorite meal? This could be something you've cooked, you've eaten on vacation, something your mom or your grandma used to cook, something you got at a restaurant.
Man, that's tough. Okay, so I love American Chinese food, which you cannot get here.
Really?
At all. It's so hard to get here.
Really?
There's no restaurant that I've been to that's got classic good American Chinese food. I'm also very into like barbecue roasted and smoked meats of different kinds. I'm all for a good steak.
I love it. Now, is there such a thing as an Israeli Chinese restaurant?
So it's not that it's Israeli Chinese. There's a lot of restaurants here that'll do like pad thai and like stir fry and Thai food and stuff like that. There's this like Far East food, and there's definitely sushi here of all different kinds.
Oh yeah, I bet you're so close to the ocean. Yeah.
But like proper American Chinese
General
food,
Tso's chicken or
General Tso's chicken and like beef and broccoli are things that are very, very difficult to find here.
The stuff we take for granted. There's a million hot walks and all those like within a stone's throw away from my house. That's really fascinating. You take that for granted, but I love
sad.
It's not authentic, but I love a good General Tso's chicken. That's I'm with you, man. I'm sorry. Well, send me your address. I'll ship you some frozen General Tso's chicken. All right. What is your favorite vacation spot?
So I don't vacation very much because of my disability. When I go on vacation, it's very often to actually go and do therapy down at the Dead Sea.
Oh wow. Okay.
Which is super quiet. Especially if you go off season, there's nobody there. It's dead. I go and do my massages, and it's this real like you're completely detached from everything that's going on in the world around you. That's gonna have some serious competition because I just went to Greece for the first time.
I've never been
with my wife and a travel companion to participate in a shooting competition because I do competitive shooting.
Wow, yeah.
And let me tell you, that was freaking awesome.
What part of Greece?
Greece was so nice.
Yeah, I've never been.
People were laid back. It was relaxed.
I love it.
It was phenomenal. So I think the Dead Sea's got some competition.
All right. What part of Greece?
We were in Corinth.
Ooh, okay. All right. Yeah, I've never been to I've been to Europe like only twice, so I've never been to anywhere past Hungary, Budapest for a couple times for work. But Greece is on my list; it's up there. All right. So the next question I normally ask everybody is, "What's your favorite design tool that's not Figma?" But since you're not a UX designer, I'm going to ask you. I'm going to call an audible and ask a Star Wars related question. What is your favorite Star Wars movie?
Ooh. Favorite Star Wars movie? It's a big debate between Rogue One and The Empire Strikes Back.
Whatever one doesn't have Jar Jar Binks, I'm assuming.
No. I don't mind Jar Jar. Jar Jar Binks didn't bother me. It would be between Rogue One. If we're talking between like the new and the old, the new ones, Rogue One was, to my mind, a really good movie. And the old ones, it's definitely The Empire Strikes Back. But I'm going to call your audible on your audible. Okay. I don't use Figma, but I do a lot of my own editing for my videos and Photoshop and stuff like that.
Okay.
And I use the Adobe suite. And
I do
you know
too.
what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it takes a lot to learn it, but once you've got the basics, I can hit up YouTube really quickly and learn the minutia of a skill and put it to work. And
Yeah.
that's, now with AI, it's
Ooh, yeah,
becoming
yeah,
even
yeah.
easier where it's like so simple.
Yeah.
But that, yeah, you know what, UX, UI, Figma, and I think it's really important for people to learn those skills, even if you're not like engineers should learn some UX skills.
I agree.
They should learn how to do stuff with WordPress and with Dreamweaver, and like those are the things you should learn.
I
Basics.
100%
Not that
agree.
hard.
I love it. Yeah, I don't mess around with the video stuff, not because I'm scared of the tools. It's mostly because my computer can't handle the processing. The processing speed on my computer would not.
I hear that.
I use Audition to edit the podcast, and sometimes it takes me 20 or 30 minutes just to export an MP3. So I can't imagine how long it would take. I need a new computer. So if you're listening out there, you want to support the show, sign up for the Patreon, help me get a new computer. But anyway, all right, Dr. D, that's pretty much everything I've got today. One more time before we get out of here, let everybody know where to find you. Give us your website one more time before we get out of here.
drdleitner.com. It's really simple, drdleitner.com.
All right. Well, Dr. D, I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much for everything today. This was super helpful. I think everybody out there is going to benefit so much from learning these followership skills. I know everybody hears all the time, like, you got these leadership skills. And I really believe after hearing all the stuff that Dr. D said today and all the stuff he's got online, that, it's not about being a leader. It's about being a follower first. And not everybody is meant to be a manager or a leader. And if you don't want to, that's okay. But you got to be a good follower.
Amen.
Well, all right, y'all. That's it for Dr. D and me for today. I hope we helped to shed a little bit of light on what followership is and how it differs from things like leadership and managing up. Was this the first time you've ever heard the term followership before? Or have you heard it? Where'd you hear it? I'm curious. I'd love to know. Have you tried any of these techniques with your boss or your team? And if so, how'd it go? I'd love to hear from you. Let me know what you think on LinkedIn or shoot me an email at hello@beyonduxdesign.com. I'd love to hear from you. If you like what you heard today, don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you feel like you're getting something out of the show, I would really appreciate you leaving a 5-star review. That would help me out so much more than you can imagine. And if you know anybody who might find any of this stuff useful, why don't you tell them about it? That would be fantastic. If you want to help keep the show independent and ad-free, check out all those Patreon sponsorship packages at beyonduxdesign.com/support. You can join Chris, Siraquan, Stacy, Radu, Megan, Andrew, John, Mark, and Kevin by supporting the show for as little as $3 a month. And there's some awesome perks like that badass holographic Beyond UX Design sticker. You can get a shout on the show every week. There's even a package to meet with me for 30 minutes every month. Don't forget to head on over to beyonduxdesign.com/audible trial to download The Courageous Follower, Standing Up to and for Our Leaders by Ira Khalif. Sign up for a free 30-day Audible trial. Cancel at any time, and the book is yours to keep forever. And in case you forgot, I've partnered with audible.com. So anytime you sign up for a free trial, you help to support the show. There's no obligation. You can cancel at any time, and the audiobook is yours to keep forever. So get a free audiobook on me and help support the show. Remember to sign up for the newsletter and check out all the past episodes, along with all the show notes at beyonduxdesign.com. I hope you keep coming back for more great UX tips from Beyond UX Design. And until next time, remember, you're more than a designer because there's more to UX than design. I'll see you around. Take care, y'all. So a duck walks into a pharmacy and he says, "Hey, can you give me some lip balm? And while you're at it, can you put it on my bill?" Because he doesn't have any lips.